So let's have a lesson on this Nocturne by Mertz. This is from his Opus 4, number 3. And if you already have the sheet music, just follow the lesson for free and pick up all the tips. But this does come from my grade 6 repertoire lessons book. And in my book series, there's a couple of pages of lesson material before each piece to teach you either some concepts about the piece itself or about studying the guitar or the fingerboard and things like that. So there's a link for that book underneath the video. But like I said, if you have the music, just follow along for free. I've included timings below as well if you want to skip some of the exercises and go to the walkthrough of the piece. But essentially, I'm just going to talk about the piece a little bit, go through some exercises, and then I'll walk through the piece just talking about it a little bit. So this is the last piece in my grade 6 book. And in some ways, this piece is easy. In other ways, it's very difficult. In terms of learning the piece, there's nothing new in this piece that you haven't encountered in my graded series yet. There's nothing new, there's no new techniques that you have to know. So there's not really a lot of barré or anything like that. So in some ways, the piece is technically very easy. However, it's much longer than any of the pieces we've played before. And it's much more complex just in terms of the fingering that's used and just the amount of notes and the oddity fingerings. So there's no difficult stretches and there's no difficult barré or anything like that. So in some ways you'll think it's easy, but once you start getting it up to speed, you might find it's quite a handful and it's kind of tricky to be accurate. So it's just a more complex, more mature piece in those regards. So I thought it was a great piece to end the grade 6 book because you can do it. You can play this piece for sure. It's not that hard, but it's going to take you some time to work through all the fingerings and work through all the complexities of the piece. So we're going to do a couple of arpeggios for the piece and then just one tricky fingering section, but there wasn't too much for me to teach in this piece. However, part of the book series is learning the fingerboard and getting more comfortable with reading and all those things. So the first thing we're going to be doing is some triadic arpeggios related to the piece, which you might find pretty difficult as well for the grade 6 level, but nevertheless, just take it slow and just learn it and you'll gain some fingerboard knowledge. So the first thing is an A minor arpeggio ascending. This does happen later in the piece, but first we're just going to do a basic full A minor arpeggio. So let's do it in small chunks first. So 3 notes at a time. And then the next 3. And then the next 3. And then the final note. Way up there on the A, right? Putting it together. I've included 2 different right-hand fingerings. One includes P, I, M, I, M, A, I, M, A, M. The other one includes a double thumb, so thumb, thumb, I, M, A, M, I, M, A, M. It's a long way to traverse across the fretboard, but it's really good practice. And just take it super slow. You shouldn't care about speed for these arpeggios. Just slow, easy, and get the idea. It's a healthy technique to learn or to introduce at this level, and then you can work in my technique book. You can work on them more intensely later. Next one is A minor arpeggio from E to E. This is the ascending portion of this occurs in the piece. Let's do it 3 notes at a time. Shift on the open string. P, I, M, A, I, M, A, M, I, A, M, I, P. You will see this arpeggio come up a ton in classical guitar because A minor is such a common key, and this move, shifting from the open string and And then doing the triad at the top there, it's a super popular move. So practice this one quite a bit until you're really confident with it, because it's going to come up in lots of pieces. The next one is an E major arpeggio. This doesn't occur in the piece, but something very similar does. So this will just orient you to the fingerboard knowledge, and it's just good practice. A little bit harder, but just take it slow. Let's do it 3 notes at a time. Right hand, thumb, thumb, I, M, A, M, A, I, M, A, M, I, A, M, I, A, M, I, D. You might find the end of that with A, M, I on the bass strings a little bit weird, but it's just to avoid too many double thumbs, which can be a little bit blocky sometimes. Now let's do the one from the piece. So this is bar 11 of the piece, and there's a double F sharp. So a double F sharp is just a G in terms of like guitar knowledge. So when you see an F double sharp, you just play it as the open G in this piece. And you might ask, well, why is it not just written as a G? It has to do with music theory. When you do this lower auxiliary like this, you don't want them to be, G sharp, G, G sharp. It's G, F double sharp, G sharp. So don't worry, don't overthink it. It's just the open third string when you see that double sharp. And we're going to use, instead of staying in first position and jumping up, we're going to actually jump up early. So we're going to go G sharp here, open string, and then we're going to play G sharp here on the 4th string at the 6th fret. And then we're ready to grab these other notes. You can use a little bit of rubato, but I think you should practice this as a technical exercise and just do it really in time. Until you're really solid at it, because when you go to play the piece, you don't want this bar to bug you. Just make sure you have it solidly down, and then you won't have to think about it much when you're playing a piece. Bar 19 and 21, there's nothing hard about this section. It's just one of those sections though where I couldn't find a fingering that I particularly loved. I was trying to do bar A's, with closing, and then lifting off and like rebarring and pivoting. There's so many options, but I ended up just kind of doing a little bit of a funny move of like going to the 2nd finger there. And then you lose a little touch of resonance when you replace the 1st finger, but really nothing harmonically is ruined, because it's kind of just going through material. It's just a little weird. Sometimes though, fingering just gets wacky, and you can choose to do bar A and stay in position if you want in this section, but at other times it's just better to like just work out a pattern that just works, even though it's kind of like irregular a little bit. Sometimes there's no good solution to these things, but anything that's repetitive and you can use the same fingering more than once is really useful. And in this passage, when you get down to this part, it's so great to keep the 2nd finger there, right? So in some ways, this is like the most straightforward, even though it's a little irregular. And that's what you have to come up against when you play more advanced repertoire, is that the fingering's just going to get like a little bit different. Not necessarily harder, but it's something you'll just have to pay attention to more and make sure that you have in your muscle memory. Most beginner level pieces are, the fingerings are all connected to the basic playing positions that are common in guitar and the scales and the arpeggios. It's very interconnected nicely to help beginners learn. As you get to more advanced levels, it just gets wackier and the fingering gets more erratic almost. But, I mean, that's a pretty straightforward fingering at the same time. So let's do a walkthrough of the piece. Now, I think that this piece will give lots of students a little bit of trouble just because it's just so thick and there's so much going on. One thing is you don't have to play it as fast as I did today. If you want to try to go even faster than I did, that by all means you could. If I practiced it a long time, I bet I could really raise that tempo. But at the same time, I don't know if the piece 100% warrants it. And the inner section, you don't want to slow down too much on it, and it likes a little bit of a slower tempo. So I would be in between something super fast, like the Vivace, and something a little bit more moderate, just so that you can balance the different sections of the piece. The opening of the piece is a little bit funny because this part down at bar 12 doesn't want to go too fast, I don't think. Like, not before the Vivace, right? That comes afterwards. So you have to take a fairly slow tempo, which makes this opening very spacious, a little too spacious. But with a little bit of rubato, so a little bit of push and pull to the rhythm, you can like get a good sense of the phrase by speeding up, slowing down. This is the perfect time to add some rubato. So you speed up through the phrase and then you back off a little bit. You take a little bit, you give a little bit. As always with rubato though, I always recommend that you practice the whole section with the metronome first. Make sure you know what the rhythms are with the metronome and that you are able to play it all perfectly in time to make sure that you're not letting yourself off the hook in terms of learning the correct rhythms and keeping a steady tempo. But then turn that metronome off and infuse it with the rhythm that you prefer and that feel helps the phrasing. But always make sure you can play it in time and correctly, just for your own sense of knowing how to do it. Okay, let's go through the piece. Make sure you're dotting enough on those figures. It'll give it a more majestic kind of feeling. I cut on those rests. Just follow my fingerings carefully there, just to make sure it's legato enough. And have a nice arch to those phrases. Cut. I would like to bring out those 5 chords and then resolve at the cadence. There's some staccato there. I wouldn't make them too extreme, just like detach them by pre-planting the finger on the string. Just pre-plant a little bit and they'll be detached. We don't have to talk about that part because we already practiced it in the exercise that we did before. So that's the advantage to taking chunks of your pieces and just practicing them as technique exercises, is that you just don't have to worry about it when you actually go to play the piece anymore. And you get to hear just very calm on M and A here, accompaniment. Just brush those strings. Just bringing out the bass line until here. much to talk about here. Here's this section that we talked about already. Again, because those triplets come in there, practice this section with the metronome a couple of times to make sure you have the rhythms solid and you're doing it correctly, and then you can turn it off, and that section can be, you can get fired up a little bit and keep it turning. Okay, and then we're into the vivace, and here we're really thinking about the 6/8 time. Here, 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 and really to some extent just feeling one beat per bar almost. Here, 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 here. This piece works out really nicely. Keep your third finger down, use the guide finger up the string. It just works really well. It's quite secure, even though you're kind of whipping your hand all over the guitar, right? There's going to be lots of repeated right hand fingers. There's so many 3-note and 4-note chords. So don't worry about it too much. Just utilize your thumb on the bass notes, like stems going down, and that will reduce it just a little bit. But nevertheless, there will be repeated fingerings. Whenever you have single lines, though, just alternate as much as possible. There's a couple of sections where I've written in right hand fingering, but for the most part, you just alternate, and there will be repetition. There's lots of opportunities for kind of like sweetness in the middle of this otherwise like rustic kind of dance almost, or tarantella. I just strum that with the thumb. There's some thick stuff in there. It's hard to get these little chords. Here, just follow my fingering. I am A, I am A, I am A, I am A. You might not find all those fingerings ideal for each single passage, but because you can use it every time there, use it, because the repetition is easier to follow than a whole bunch of nitty-gritty specific fingerings that are perfect for each passage. You can do the same fingering for each sequence there, so I do recommend just using it. There, use your fingers on those bass strings. And there's just some like fingerings that you have to pay attention to, like using the 4th finger so that 1 and 2 are available afterwards. It's nothing hard about it, but there's just lots to pay attention to in this piece. And then we're into a much more gentle section, kind of more in the major key of C major, the relative major. Lots of suspensions here. Like here, you have a B on the top. And it only resolves for like a little moment quite a bit afterwards. So you get that non-chord tone B, but then it resolves to the C pretty quickly. So when you have those non-chord tones, don't be shy. Let them come out. The composer wants that as like a little juicy or emotionally intense note. So don't be afraid of them. Thick section, there's nothing too difficult. It's just it's specific fingering, that's all. a pivot there. Pivot into the barre. So I'm playing that C, but I keep my finger on the C. Barre. I like this little playful development section. Just and track that bass line, right? When you play this chord, keep your first finger down. For some reason, it's really hard not to play like the third string with the first finger afterwards, for whatever reason. But if you leave your first finger down, you don't even have to move it. And then we're transitioning back. And you're back. Repetition from the beginning. Same thing with the previous section. Same fingering each time. I am A, I am A, and then we have to scale. I use my fingers until the last note. We already practiced the arpeggio for this, so you should be able to do it if you've practiced it. There, slide the fourth finger down, and then just jump. I don't have too much to say. It's there's just not a lot of like tricky technical sections. It's only tricky because it's a little bit fast, and it's only tricky because it's a little bit thick and specific. So what I recommend is that study all the most difficult sections as technique exercises. Make sure they're comfortable. At that point, you should be able to start playing through the piece really nice and slowly. And just get all the things into your hands, and you just need more time. More advanced pieces take longer to learn. You know, students will spend an entire year really preparing a piece for a performance. And that's just the way it goes. The harder the material, the longer it's going to take for your body and your mind to digest the material and to go after it. But the thing is it requires a lot of patience on your part, because you have to practice it really slow for a really long time. And that's hard for some people. It's hard for some people to keep that tempo down and to just put in the muscle memory time and the foundational work of a piece. Spending months just like playing it ultra slowly. People usually want to like gear up and they just want to play it at full speed and then work out the problems afterwards. But once the pieces start getting bigger, you got to suppress that tendency and just build a foundation of technique and muscle memory for the piece, having lots of patience, and you'll be rewarded in the end. It's like a delayed gratification thing. You'll be rewarded if you take the time and have the patience. And also you might find the experience more enjoyable overall because you don't get frustrated with a whole bunch of different parts of the piece. Instead, you've taken your time, you learned it properly, and then you just progress and get faster and better with the piece. It's just like a real straight line going up that you just get better and better and better gradually. And that can feel really good rather than bringing the piece up and then feeling like you're getting knocked down whenever there's a technical difficulty. So I hope you enjoy the piece.